Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste and a hearty welcome to one and all for today's 8th session of Atma Bodha. Friends, I would like to recall 3 momentous occasions in January. 13th January marked the celebration of Bogi, a beautiful blend of spirituality, culture and community, marked the first day of the 4-day Pongal harvest festival in South India. Significance this year is that it was on Pushya Masam, Paurnami Tithi, Somavaram and Aridra Nakshatra, the nakshatra of Lord Shiva. A combination that has come together only twice in 110 years since 1940. Makara Sankranti is celebrated on 14th, a significant festival with deep spiritual meaning. A time for spiritual reflection, gratitude and celebration, marking harmonious balance between nature and human life. Coinciding on this auspicious day, the Mahakumbh began. It concludes on 26th February, marked by Mahashivaratri. The Mahakumbh is a profound spiritual journey for millions of devotees seeking purification, blessings, and a deeper connect with the divine. We know that after the Samudra Manthan, few drops of Amrut fell at 4 sacred locations, namely Prayagraj, Haridwar, Ujjain, and Nasik. A holy dip in the sacred waters of the Triveni Sangam is believed to help devotees attain moksha. Today, our Param Vedanta teachers, Srimati Aruna, Dr. Rekha, Srimati Purnima, Dr. Manjula Devi, will explain verses 32 to 35 of Atma Bodha, or self-knowledge, a profound text composed of 68 verses written in the 8th century by Bhagavad-pada Adi Shankaracharya, to guide seekers to shed ignorance and realize their true nature and attain moksha. This session will be moderated by our revered teacher, Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir, who, drawing from his vast knowledge, will give us complex concepts in a simple nutshell. To start, Dr. Divakar will help us recall the shlokas of the previous session. Over to Dr. Divakar.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Let's look at the summary of the verses covered in the last class. We studied verse 28 onwards till verse 31. So, Atma Bodha is the condensation of the entire Vedas. In fact, Vedanta Vichara is beautifully presented by Adi Shankaracharya through fantastic metaphors and similes. From the verse 16 till 29, Tvam-Tat Vichara, the Jeevatma Vichara is talked about. Next slide. In the verse 28, we see how the inner sentience or the consciousness principle alone is responsible for the enlivening of everything else. In other words, we know that there is Atma and Anatma. Atma, which is the sentient principle, is giving sentience to the Anatma, which is Jada. Anything other than the consciousness is Jadam or the matter. So, Atma ava bhasayati ekaha, the self alone illuminates. Buddhi adini indriyani apihi, the intellect, etc., etc. Here is everything else in the subtle body. Antahkarana, we have the Jnanendriyas, we have the Karmendriyas, all of them, Pancha Pranas, all of them are enlivened by the Atma alone. And then, just like how the light inside a pot illumines the pot and it comes out through the holes which are there in the pot. Deepaha gata adivat swatma jadaihitai na avabhasayati. The pot itself is inert, but the light which percolates through the pot is because of the light inside that. So pot itself doesn't have any radiance. So this reminds us of a fantastic shloka in the Dakshinamurti Stotra. Nana Chidra Gatodara Stita Mahadeepa Prabhabhaswaram Gnanam Yasya Tu Chakshuradi Karanadvara Bahispandate. So the Deepa, the sentience or the Atma, which is inside, is enlivening all the organs. And we have also learned in the fifth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Navadvarapuri, and we have seen it in the Kathopanishad where Navadvarapuri is mentioned for our body, where all the randras are just the outward symbols to represent the inner sentience that we all have, which is Atma. Next slide, please. In this next slide, we will see if Atma illumines everything else in the body, what about Atma itself? Who illumines the Atma? This beautiful shloka says, Swabhode na anya bodhecha. To know the self, there is no need for any other knowledge. Again, the example taken here, Bodha Rupataya Atmanaha, for one's own self, is of the form of knowledge. The Atma itself is the highest knowledge. It is the knowledge itself. Therefore, you don't need any other pramana to prove the Atma. In fact, Shastras do reveal this, but Shastras are only telling us through Shravanam and Mananam. We know through Nidhidhyasanam to reveal oneself, to reveal myself, I don't need any other pramana other than just this awareness that I am. Just like na deepasya anya deepecha, a lighted lamp does not require another light to be shown to show its own brightness. We have all celebrated Deepavali. We know that we light up these diyas. So one diya is lit up. In order to show whether that diya is lit up or not, you don't bring in one more light, right? So the sun itself is so radiant and bright, you don't need one more sun to show that it is bright. That is a beautiful example taken by Adi Shankaracharya. And Swamiji gives this fantastic example. Imagine there is a meeting where I am taking the count of all the people who have already attended this meeting. In that list, my name is also there. Do I need a proof? I'm already there in that meeting. Do I need any more proof that I'm there in that meeting or not? No, I don't need any more proof because I am the one who's taking the account of everybody else. I am there already. So therefore, Swaprabhavaha. So one that is self-luminous. It does not require any other source of knowledge to illumine itself. So that is the example given. Next slide, please. So with this, the Tvam-Pada Vichara is over. Tvam-Pada Vichara will help us understand the difference between the Atma and the Anatma. So, Swayam Prakashaha Chetana Aham Asmi, I am that Atma, is kind of declared and we all accept that. But there is this Anatma also, that which is Jadam. So what happens to this Anatma? Therefore, still there is this dichotomy of Atma and Anatma. Therefore, Dvaitam still exists. To reconcile this, we need the Tat-Pada Vichara. We need to understand the nature of Bhagavan. In the gift sessions, we've been learning about the nature of Bhagavanta, nature of Ishvara, from the chapter 7, and now we are studying the chapter 11, which is the Vishwarupa Ishvara. Tat-Pada Vichara is absolutely must in order to reconcile with the Dvaita conflict. And not just that, once we know Tat-Pada Vichara, we should also know the Aikya Vichara. That essence of Paramatma and me, the Jivatma, is one and the same, must be known. So we have dealt with the secondary Adhyasa, which is the body-mind dichotomy. I know that I am not this body mind. I know that I am not this anatma. That is through the Jivatma Vichara or the Tvam-Pada Vichara. But the primary adhyasa, which is through the Maya, the concept of the Vikshepa and the Avarana, the projection and the concealing ability of the Maya, we learn through the Tat-Pada Vichara. For this, Shastras and Swamiji and all the Gurus bring about Karya Karana equation, Karya Karana Sambandha. So there is only one Karanam, which is the cause for the entire Karyam of the universe. Other than God, we have also learnt in the Vishwarupa Ishvara yoga that other than God, there is nothing else. So once we know that there is only a mud and there is no pot, because the pot is nothing but the mud with the names and the forms, this Karya Karana Bheda is also reconciled. Therefore, when we say Karya Karana, because there is no effect without the cause, there is only cause which ultimately exists. That is the Tat Tvamasi. In the next slide, we see. And in order to do that, we have to get into the concept of negation. We have to systematically negate all that which is the karyam, which is the effect, and end up at ultimate karanam alone. Through this Nishidhya Nikila Upadin, by the process of negation of all the conditionings. Upadis are all the Nama Rupas, all the conditionings. Na iti Vakyataha, as per the scriptural statements. Here, specifically referring to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Within that Upanishad, at least on 4 different places, na iti is talked about. As we know, Brihadaranyaka also gives us the Mahavakya of the Aham Brahma Asmi. So, Vidyad Aikyam Mahavakyaihi. Through that, I understand the essential nature of the Paramatma and me, the Jivatma, is one and the same. That is Atma. Even by simply writing Paramatma and Jivatma in numerator and denominator, you take away the differences and what remains is the Atma. Atma by Atma is what remains. Essential nature of the wave and the ocean is water alone. So that realization has to be kind of contemplated upon and lived upon through Nidhidhyasanam. So that Jiva Atma Paramatma Atmanoho, that individual soul is nothing but the supreme soul, and in fact there is only one soul. The next slide we see that in order to do that, we know through the Tattva Bodha, we have learned all these things. In the macrocosm and the microcosm, we have how these upadhis are brought about. In fact, just like how we have randras in the body, which brings about the essence of the innermost Atma, even in the universe, we have so-called the letouts. So we know that the shariras, we have the vyasti, which is the individual shariras, which is gross body, subtle body, and the causal body. They are respectively called as Vishwa, Taijasa, and Prajna. And we have the reflected consciousness Chidabhasa. Therefore, there are 4 items in the microcosm Jivatma. And there are also 4 items in the macrocosm. So we have the reflected consciousness plus 3 reflected mediums, as well as in the macrocosm, it is the same thing, which are the gross body in the macrocosm is called as Virat, and subtle body is Hiranyagarbha, and then Antaryami or Ishvara, which is the representation of Maya, the causal body. So there also we have the reflected consciousness. This is the 4 plus 4. In both of them are all upadhis only. And we have the Turiyam, which enlivens all of this. And we have studied this beautifully in the Mandukya Upanishad. And through the Mahavakyas, we understand that we negate all these upadhis and anchor to the only the consciousness principle. And we know all the Mahavakyas, and the sample Mahavakyas through all the Upanishads are also listed here. In the last verse, we see, once we have negated all this, there is also another prakriya. In the next verse, we see that how we can negate through drishyas also. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we need to understand that all the upadhis are born out of avidya. Okay, the causal body as far as the microcosm is concerned, and Maya as far as the macrocosm is concerned. And all of them are nothing but the drishyas only, the objects that we appreciate. Whereas the very subject is the drik. Whatever we see as an object and perceive as an object, including the body mind, they are all perishable only. So to make this more understanding, Adi Shankaracharya gives a fantastic example of bubbles. How all the water bubbles, we know how kshanika, how impermanent the bubbles are. Sometimes these bubbles are big, sometimes they are small, sometimes they have a lot of colors. We have seen all the kids playing in um, all the functions in marriages, marriage halls. All of them will go and eventually they all burst. And just like that, just like our dreams, just like those bubbles, all these material world is also as impermanent is what is brought about. Does it mean there is no value for all of this? Definitely not. Let us not take this lightly. There is a lot of value, just like how there is a lot of value in the bubble. When the child plays, there is a lot of entertainment. Just like that, body and world has lot of value, and we have to respect and treat that with all humility and use that for our spiritual elevation. So avidyakam shariradi, the body, etc., body, mind, and all of them are because of the causal body, because of the maya. They all are avidyakam only. Drishyam budbudavat sharam. So they are all as perishable as bubbles. Etad vilakshanam vidyat. Vilakshanam means that which is other than the matter, that which is other than the inert objects, which is nothing but the consciousness itself. That which is other than that is the consciousness. I am that. So aham brahma iti nirmalam. I am that pure Nishkalam, one without the impurities, is I am. In the next slide, we see this picture. Next slide, please. Next slide, the last one. We have covered this. So in the last slide, we see how the Karana Sharira can be very big. And then from that is born, what we get is Stula Sharira, which is also the house for a Sukshma Sharira. All of them are different bubbles. Eventually, all of them are as perishable. Whatever comes in the time slot, whatever comes within the assault of the time and the space, they're all perishable ones. And what that is permanent is Brahman alone. And this verse, the last verse, can be compared to the Shravanam. In fact, this next verse is also part of Shravanam. And then we have a couple of verses which will deal with the Mananam, and verse 34 to 37 onwards, Nidhidhyasanam is covered. And we will continue the study of Atma Bodha. Thank you. Hari Om.
Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Pariyantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. What is bhakti? Let us reflect on the highest form of love. Bhakti is love or devotion directed to a higher principle, for example, a guru, the nation, God, or parents. Normally, we think bhakti is a separate sadhana. Our Swamiji, Swami Paramarthananda, is very clear. It is not a separate sadhana. It is a sadhana which includes karma yoga, upasana yoga, and jnana yoga. We have recently studied all these three sadhanas. Let us see how there is bhakti in each of these sadhanas. For example, in karma yoga is right attitude and right action. And this right attitude includes Ishvara Arpana Bhava and Ishvara Prasada Bhava. That means whatever I do, Yad karoshi, yadasnashi, whatever action I do, even simple acting like eating and taking care of your body. Now, if we treat that with bhakti, that is karma yoga. Whenever an action is brought in with devotion, that becomes bhakti, and therefore karma yoga has bhakti. So one of the aspects of bhakti is karma yoga. Now we studied about Upasana Yoga. What is Upasana Yoga? Upasana Yoga is a mental activity related to God, prayer and meditation. Whenever I'm doing Japa Sadhana on the name of Sri Ram, Jai Ram, God and Bhakti is still there. Whenever I'm doing a Parayana, that means reading the Bhagavad Gita or any sacred text, again there is Bhakti there. Any form of Manasa Puja. So Upasana Yoga is imbued or saturated with Bhakti. Right now, we are doing Jnana Yoga. Before we study any scriptures, we begin with a prayer. We conclude with a prayer. Our whole bhavana is on discovering God. Whole aspect about Jnana Yoga is to be able to discover God in the world around me, in people around me, and finally to be able to discover God in me. Therefore, Jnana Yoga involves Bhakti also. So let us now be very clear that Bhakti is not a separate sadhana from Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, but it is a fusion of all the three. That means Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga combined becomes Bhakti. Now, where do we evolve? See, all of us are able to relate in a space of love to someone who is very dear, like a child or like a spouse. But this is love oriented towards one person. But the same love, if it can become diffuse, it becomes for everybody. My love is, there is no sense of Bheda. I make no distinction on whom. Then what happens? That love becomes Bhakti. Bhakti is a form of a love where, that is why all realized people have said that God is love. And in that state, love becomes Bhakti. Now, because Bhakti involves God, what is our understanding of God? Now, as we spiritually evolve, depending upon the maturity and the intellectual caliber of a student, the Bhagavad Gita and all our teachers give three definitions of God. One is called Eka Rupa, or God with form, like Krishna, Rama, Ganapati, Devi, and so on. Slowly they take us, like in the Bhagavad Gita, we are studying Vishwarupa, Ishvara. Initially Vibhuti, to be able to see God in the world and to be able to see the whole God as the world. And finally, when we go through the stepping stone of Vishwarupa, to be able to discover God as the limitless space, like all-pervading principle, which is there everywhere and which is there in me, which is called the Arupa form of Bhakti. So, if there is a beautiful creation around me, our sense organs and mind will say, there must be a creator. So rationally, we will say there must be a creator, but I don't see the creator anywhere around. I imagine there is a creator who is invisible, but somewhere far away. We will say beyond my sense organs. So whenever something is beyond my sense, aksha means sense organs. So the combination of all the akshi means I, iksha means sense organ. When something is paroksha, beyond my sense organs, I cannot see God, I cannot feel God. So initially we say God is there in heaven, far away. That idea is called God as the creator, Jagat, Karta, Ishvara. But as a person becomes evolved and you begin to think, in the beginning only God was there. How did God create? God has to create from something. Now we understand, to create, the God has to create from himself only. Other than himself, other than God, nothing else exists. So what is that raw material? Now, Swami Anubhavananda was asked to come to see a certain statue of Lord Ganesha by a certain sculptor who had just molded from the clay. He saw a beautiful model of Ganesha, but then he said, "Where is the mouse?" Oh, he said, "I forgot." But he had run out of clay. So what he did, because there was more clay in the abdominal region, he took some soft clay from there, molded it, and it made it into a mouse, which means if God has to create, the raw material has to come from God. And now if this is understood, then look around, feel, touch, see. all that you feel, touch here is none other than God in the form of creation, which is Vishwarupa. And this process is called a divinization process, where we bring in a sense of reverence to everything that we see. This understanding is called God as Jagat Karanam. God himself happens to be the very raw material, just like the spider creates a web out of himself. When we visit Kailash and do a parikrama, you feel the sacredness of the place around, and you have other devout people who will be doing namaskara at each step as they are doing the parikrama. That means the whole ground is sacred. But once you develop that sense of sacredness, wherever you feel Bhumi, you see Bhudevi. And that is why we have that prayer before we put our feet on the ground to Goddess Lakshmi. Samudra Vasane Devi, Parvati Sanamandali, Vishnupati Namastubhyam, Padas Paksha Kshamasve. Please excuse me. As we evolve, then we try to understand that Ishvara is Jagat Adhishtanam. That means God is the substratum, the existence principle, and we have to understand two words which is called immanent and transcendental. God is in and through. You have this nice word, my sarvam idam prottam sutre manigana eva. God is invisibly all-pervading. Although he is very intimately associated, God being of a higher order of reality is not affected, is not asangaha. Just like the events on a dream don't really affect me, the waker, so too God is transcendental to anything that happens in the creation. Two words that need to be understood. Now, therefore, we have seen God as Ekarupa, Anekarupa, and Arupa. Now, let us see the intensity of love that we have for God also depends upon how you look at God. For most of the people in the world, for 99.9% of religious people, God is the means and world is the goal. What do you mean by God is the means and world is the goal? I have some financial difficulty. I have a medical problem. I have some insecurity. And whenever there is a problem, I go to the Lord and say, Bhagavan, please help me, because let me get security in the world, let me get happiness in the world, let me get all the good things in the world, which means God is the means and world is the goal. But as you go through Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, a time will come, Pariksha Lokan Karmachitan Brahmana. What have I acquired? What is the use of all this acquisition? And that is the 180-degree turn when suddenly God becomes my goal and the world becomes my means. What do you mean by that? Now, every difficulty that I have is a picture of God. Through every difficulty. That is why very courageous people like Kunti keep saying, please give me difficulty, O Krishna, because only when there are difficulties, I tend to think about you. See that. So we are not using Krishna to solve our problem, but we are seeing every difficulty for us to turn our attention to the Lord, because now my quest is God and nothing else. The world is only to take care of my body and for basic reasons like roti, kapada, or makan. This is a significant evolution. Slowly and slowly, when you are in satsang with people like Swami Paramarthananda, who have discovered God within themselves, and if you see, if one person can discover God within you, can I not see the same God in me? Why should God be partial in one person and not in everybody else? The same God must be in me also. Now, once you discover God as not other than me, abheda bhava, then you will see the intensity of love depends upon, is God the means, is God the goal, or is God myself? Now, what do you mean by God is the means? For example, I have to do a pole vault and I have to cross a certain height. To use that, I make use of a pole. So the pole is the means, crossing the bar is my goal. Once I cross the bar, what do I do to the pole? I gently let go. Whenever we are doing a parikrama in difficult places like Mount Kailash, Then what happens? You have a porter who is paid to help you to carry your luggage and provide you sense of direction so that you don't get lost. So there is a porter, each one engages a porter. Now, when you are with the porter, you're separated from your family because you walk at your pace. Your porter is your guide. His language is different. Through sign language, we communicate. But over a period of time, there is such an amount of bonding. You love the porter because he is the means to help you to achieve the goal, that is parikrama around Mount Kailash. Once the parikrama is over, your porter will say, thank you very much. We tip you extra, be happy. And then once your goal is achieved, my goal is more important than the means. And once the means is achieved, the means is dropped. But then the highest form of understanding is God as myself. Therefore, all of us love ourselves the most. About this, we should have no doubt. So God can be classified as means God, as dear God, end God, as God as my goal is dearer. And when I have discovered God as myself, God becomes dearest to me. The dearest form of God is when there is no Veda. There is a story which Bhagwan Ramana always keeps talking about. A group of salt dolls were on the seashore and were discussing about what is the sea, how big it is, and a lot of discussion was going on. Nobody ventured to go near the sea, but one salt doll decided to experiment. Let me experiment and feel for me what the sea is all about. I don't want theory, let me have a real experience. And as it went, it became lighter and lighter. And at one time, it dissolved into the sea. And this is how our love for God, as your love for God increases, you dissolve in the Lord. And this is how Bhagavan wants us to do, by constantly keeping one's attention on Bhagavan, the higher source. The ego, that which keeps me away from the Lord, is dissolved in the source, like the salt doll in the sea. Swami Chinmayananda had something very nice to say. He says, when love or bhakti increases, the distance decreases. When we love somebody intensely, we say he or she is very close to me. The greatest love is when the distance is zero. There is no gap between the bhakta and Bhagavan. For a jnani, Bhagavan is not just close. He is not apart from Bhagavan. He is Bhagavan. In the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, you will have some beautiful verses. Tulya nindastu sthirmauni santushto yena kenachit aniketaha stiramatihi bhakti mam impriyo naraha. You know, such a person is dear to me, who is same whether he's praised or whether he's criticized. He has come to a state of silence. He's content with whatever he's given. He is unattached to anything. Such a person is dear to me. There is another very beautiful verse which depicts the highest form of love. Atma pammena sarvatra samam pashyati yorjuna sukham va yadi va dukkam sa yogi paramo mataha. Atma pammena sarvatra. The way I see myself, how dear I am to myself, in the same way if I'm able to see. That means in true love, there is no sense of differentiation. A mother loves her child like herself. But then there is another child, she's very much concerned about another child there, but it is not her child. You will see there is a difference. But if you're able to have that love, not only for my child, the same love for everybody. That is what this verse says. Atma pammena sarvatra samam pashyati yorjuna. If you're able to see everybody like yourself, sukham va yadiva dukkam, in all states. Such a person, he says, sa yogi paramaha. Such a person is a highly evolved person. Mataha. This is my opinion. So shall we conclude the various steps in the whole sadhana for bhakti? Initially, it is sakama karma. That means I do actions result-oriented. It is rajasic. Sometimes I may be indifferent to others. And there is no spiritual growth. But this is the first step. So Sri Krishna in the 12th chapter includes this step as a step of bhakti, where you do karma for your own requirements as a selfish requirement. But then you come to nishkama. That means I am doing out of my fulfillment. It is my need. I'm not looking for a result. And I do sattvika karma or para upakara karmani like pancha mahayagnya, which involves giving more, taking less. And whenever you come to the sattvic form of karma, such a person becomes spiritually elevated. He becomes inclined to the teaching. A guru will appear in his life. The third step is Eka Rupa Ishvara Upasana. Once a guru comes into your life, the guru will introduce certain techniques like mantra japa on your Ishta Devata. Whoever is your Ishta Devata, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. Initially a symbol, initially a pratima, God with form. Later on, it could be a symbol like Omkara, Shivalinga, Saligrama. You're slowly moving from the form to the formless. Later on, the teacher will try to tell you to develop a sense of reverence. This is called Vishwarupa Ishvara Bhakti, to develop love for the whole world, to have everything in creation. And finally, the teacher will teach you what is Arupa Ishvara, to be able to meditate on the meditator, to be able to meditate on my true nature. So these are the forms of evolution: Sakama, Nishkama, Eka Rupa Ishvara Upasana, Vishwarupa Ishvara Upasana, and Nirguna Brahma Upasana, which will finally lead you to moksha. I will conclude with a story. And this is a story which will tell you that if there is love in your heart, Sri Krishna will always be there. This is Sri Krishna's convocation message when he came back to Sandipani. Lord Krishna was invited to bless the graduating students of Sandipani on their convocation day. Emperor Yudhishthira and his brothers accompanied Sri Krishna, and they were also very eager to see the place where Lord Sri Krishna had once studied. The word Krishna means Akarshanam iti Krishna. The students had heard so many stories about Krishna, and they were so thrilled at the prospect of seeing Krishna real and all the great Pandavas. And as Krishna entered the hall, there was a palpable feeling of excitement. And the greatest attraction was Sri Krishna, because every gesture, every smile, every movement was mesmerizing. Yudhishthira first spoke to the students. He said, "Dear students, this is a sacred place which belongs to Sri Krishna. The greatest gift that you can carry from here is carry him in your heart. Faith in Krishna is the mightiest weapon," he said. His grace is the strongest armor. His memories are eternal guiding light. Though you may leave this place, never depart from his presence. He continues. You may admire the strength of Bhima. Bhima was also there. The skill of Arjuna, the beauty of Nakula, the wisdom of Sahadeva. Your young minds may be drawn to the dazzle of wealth and the allure and the attraction of the world. But as you face the unforgiving challenges of life, you will realize the importance of my words. Today, you may see me as the emperor of the world, but I wish you could peer into my heart. All that I am is because of Krishna. Krishna will always be with you. His words will guide you. This is my only message, and I have come to give this to you. Then Sri Krishna rose to speak. He began softly. Long ago, when I herded cows, he would carry the calf away, and the mother would naturally follow. No force was needed. Similarly, take me by carrying love in your heart. Keep love alive in your heart. That love is the calf that draws me to you. Share it with the world, and you will never be without me. He smiled and continued, live that love, be that love, and I will always be with you. This is the only gift I seek from you. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Our first speaker, verse 32, will be Aruna. Aruna, please.
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. This verse 32 starts the topic of Vedantic contemplation of Mananam and Nidhidhyasanam. It is important to remember that these verses are not addressing the person who knows nothing of Advaita Vedanta, but addresses the sadhaka, an aspirant who through Shravanam of the Mahavakya has understood the Jeeva Brahma Aikyam. Shravanam is not merely listening to the concepts of the scriptures, but recognizing the connect between Aham and Brahman, between I and Brahman. Also, it is important to note that these verses are all in fact in the first person, referring to I, and not in the third person. This is because after Shravanam, a sadhaka has to contemplate on the I and meditate on the nature of Atman as me, as myself. Now, we have all heard this many, many times, yet we continue to think of ourselves as the doer or the individual jiva. Therefore, we need constant reminders of what our true nature is, and we need to counteract the decades of habitual conditioning of identifying with the body. In this process, we convert indirect knowledge into direct knowledge. Next slide, please. So let us look at this verse now. Dehanyatvanna me janma jara karshalaya daya shabdadi vishaya sango nirindriyataya nacha. Next slide, please. So let us understand this, first line of this verse in the right context. The earlier verses have described the body as drishya, as an object, and therefore taking this perspective into account, dehanyatvat, since I am anya, I am other than the body, I do not, other than the body, na me janma, I do not take birth, I am not born. In this verse, Bhagavan Shankara has started the first and most obvious avidya or viparita bhavana, that is identification of oneself with the body. Because the body is drishya or an object, as the earlier verses said, the attributes and modifications that accrue to the body do not accrue to me, the self. That is the attributes of jara, old age, karsha, meaning decline, and becoming weak, and finally laya, death, maranam. All these do not accrue to me, I am not affected by them. As the self, I am not disturbed or changed in any way because of these modifications. I remain the same eternally. So this is the first real contemplation, that is the disidentification with the body. Next slide, please. The second line now talks about inner contemplation with regard to the senses. The word nirindritaya means that since I am not the body, the self, and I am the self, I am not influenced by the sense organs that belong to the body. The senses pick up information from the world around, convey it to the mind where vrittis are created, and the vrittis are actually illumined by the self or consciousness. But the self or consciousness or Atman is independent of these vrittis. And the Atma that I am is asanga, or not connected or influenced by shabda, any sound, or any vishaya, which is an experience. The Atman is unaffected, asanga. Although the senses may suffer, the Atman does not suffer at all. Then there's a short take on what is this contemplation that they're talking about. Formal meaning contemplation is only done in a quiet mind, a mind that is still, even if it is only for a few moments. In such a mind, inquiry into the nature of the self is possible, and this will confirm the teachings of the scriptures. In this way, this contemplation becomes not just an intellectual understanding, but becomes a deep experiential state which is what Nidhidhyasana is all about. Nidhidhyasanam is about experiencing the teachings of the Mahavakya, not merely understanding it. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you, Aruna. Our next speaker is Dr. Rekha. Dr. Rekha, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Hari Om. So as has been recapped already, we have done with Shravanam and Mananam from verses 25 to 29. So from verse 30 onwards, we have Neti, the doctrine of negation. And from verse 31, Nidhidhyasanam has started. So Nidhidhyasanam here with Neti is the process where we relentlessly negate everything that is not the self in a systematic manner, starting with that which is grossest to that which is the most subtle. So this is explained in the previous verse and verse 33. It calls for a firm conviction that these externals are perishable and unreliable and cannot give us the happiness that we seek. Next slide, please. So we come to verse 33. Beyond mind and pranas am I. Amanastvat name dukkha raga dvesha bhayadayaha aprano humana shubra ityadi shruti shasanat. Because I am not this mind, thus not for me is sorrow, attachment, malice, fear, and so on. The self is without prana and even without mind. It is pure. Thus declare the Shrutis or Upanishads. Next slide, please. So in the previous verse, the gross body, Sthula Sharira, and the Indriyas were negated. This negation continues in the present shloka, where Pranamaya and Manomaya are discussed. Now, this step is more subtle than that described in the previous verse, because it is more difficult to negate the mind than to negate the body, because the abstract is more elusive than the concrete. In the second line, prana hi amana shubbraha. This means I am free of pancha prana because they belong to the gross body, sthula sharira. I am also free of the fourfold mind, that is mano, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, the entire antakarana, because they belong to the sukshma sharira. I am thus pure. Pure is shubbraha. Ityadi shruti. This is the teaching we received in Shravanam in the Mundaka Upanishad, chapter 2, the first section, the second mantra. This is a very important mantra, which basically the message is I am free from pranamaya and manomaya. In the next slide, Swami Paramarthananda says, so what? What is so what that you're free? So the answer is that I have freedom, because all the problems of pranamaya and manomaya, they belong to them. So I should never say I have those problems, for example, breathing or digestive problems. But however, it's my responsibility to make sure I'm reasonably healthy. As long as prarabdha is there, I do my duty so that I can do other work and I don't trouble others. However, amanatva, I am different from the mind, and therefore dukkha, raga, dvesha, bhaya, all these feelings are away from me and I am always free of them. So the example given is if I wake up in the morning and I have thoughts that are very worrisome, and then I keep, reflecting on those thoughts, the whole day is going to be a bad day for me. So I shouldn't do that, but I see them as thought patterns that belong to the mind. So when we objectify our thoughts, remaining as Sakshi, we can control them by not cooperating with them. So then we get freedom from pessimism, anxiety, depression, all negative emotions. A prana, I'm different from the prana. And therefore, all these difficulties of the body, they do not belong to me. So what is prescribed is meditation, which should be done as often and as long as possible. And Swami Paramarthananda tells us that there will be a change in one's life right away because there is immediate benefit. It is not that it's going to happen later on. Next slide, please. So from verse 31 onwards, the text has begun to use the first person I. I am the subject of all actions. This is because the negation process is one that concerns only me in my relationship with the upadhis. So it is an individual sadhana to overcome individuality. And we are told that no one else need even know that we are doing the sadhana. It's a personal practice done for self-purification, not for acquiring any, it doesn't need others to commend us. It is not an achievement for the ego. So in that sense, this should be done. Next slide, please. Swami Chinmayananda compares this step, that is of bringing the mind under scrutiny, as one would view or analyze one's own dream. So once the dream is seen as a dream, it ceases to carry with it all the associated feelings and emotions it may have carried while it was still a dream. So once I wake up from a dream, if there is something which is very sorrowful in the dream, like the dying of a child, the moment I wake up, I don't feel any sorrow. Similarly, the seeker does not lament that he has to give up all the feelings that he once associated with his experiences. So the seeker will see his mental encounters dispassionately as a witness. The death of all good or bad emotions and thoughts is not a cause for mourning any more than are the termination of the sorrows and joys of a dream upon awakening. Next slide, please. So the logic of Vedanta is simple and we need not complicate it, is what we are taught. The process is seen simply like this. I am not these emotions. I am free from sorrow and pain. I have no attachment, malice, or fear. This practice, if carried out in simplicity with purity, is sure to bring the result of peace of mind. In other words, we should be very happy to be free from the mind, because it's a direction given by the Shrutis, Upanishads themselves. Handling of the mind in this way should bring us joy, not regret that we have lost something. And performed in this manner, the due reward of mental peace is sure to come, is what is promised. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you, Dr. Rekha. As all these verses are on Nidhidhyasanam, I will speak on Nidhidhyasanam after all the four speakers. Purnima, please.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Shankaracharya discussed the main topic of Jnana Yoga from verse 15 to 30. Next slide, sir. We now know Jnana Yoga consists of threefold exercise. Shravanam, systematic study of Vedanta from a guru. Mananam, convincing our own intellect by answering every doubt the intellect raises. Nidhidhyasanam, this process ensures our total identification with our real self, the Atma or the Brahman, and its innate intrinsic nature. So, by Shravanam, Gnanam has been acquired. By Mananam, doubts have been removed. Now the next step is Nidhidhyasanam. This process is done not as someone who is trying to look at Atma and its nature as an outsider, but as one who is himself the Atma or Brahman. Next slide, sir. From verse 31 to 41, Shankaracharya emphasizes and teaches us the Nidhidhyasanam process. In these verses, the term I, AHAM or ASMI is used for referring to ourself, Atma or Brahman, and to inculcate total identification in us with ourself. Next slide, sir. It is the deepest contemplation or meditation on the self. This meditation is on the meditator himself, as Swami Dayananda Saraswati popularly says. So, meditation is not for Atma Anubhava. There is no event as Atma Anubhavam. We are experiencing Atma all the time. Pratibodha Viditam Matam. Meditation is to remove habitual identifications, habitual worries, and habitual fears of insecurity, which is always there deep inside. I need to understand and see my glory in all its completeness now. Next slide, sir. When identification is with Sharira Trayam, Stula, Sukshma, and Karana Sharira, without immediately realizing it, I get into the unending pool of samsara. In samsara, I am never free. I am always tossed in the dualities of life. Now, if I am not the Stula, Sukshma, or Karana Sharira, nor the mind, nor the Indriyas, then who am I? Next slide, sir. Who am I is spoken in the following three verses, 34, 35, 36. Verse 34. Nirguno nishkriyo nityo nirvikalpo niranjanaha nirvikaro nirakaro nityamuktosmi nirmalaha. Next slide, sir. We therefore start saying I the Atma or I the Brahman and then recounting Atma's intrinsic nature as our own. I am without attributes and actions, nirguna and nishkriya, eternal, nitya, without any desire and thought, nirvikalpa, without any dirt, niranjana, without any change, nirvikara, without form, nirakara, ever liberated, nitya mukta, ever pure, nirmala. Next slide, sir. I am nirgunaha. I am free from all the limiting attributes like sattva, rajas, and tamas or their multifarious combinations, good or bad. I am nishkriyaha. I am actionless. Walking, talking, running, etc. all pertain to shariratrayam. I have no need for any actions or transactions. Consciousness or Atma does not walk, talk, or jump around. Because of the upadhi of the body, all these actions appear in me, the consciousness, but they are really not in me. They are born of ignorance, avidya. They are unreal appearances. I am the reality. I am nityaha. I am eternal. I am beyond time limitations. All the drishya objects are continuously under change. I am the unchanging observer, illuminator of all of them. I am nirvikalpaha. I am without any divisions. All parts of Shariratrayam and Chidabhasa are Savikalpa. Savikalpa means having parts which are subject to change continuously. What is Nirvikalpa? Only the original consciousness, which is I, the higher I. I am Niranjanaha. I am stainless, not tainted. I am free from blemish or black spot. Maya or avidya is the fundamental black spot. I am avidya rahitaha. I have no negativities. I am nirvikaraha. I do not undergo any change. I am free from all the 6 modifications of the Shariratrayam, like Asti, Jayate, Vardhate, Viparinamate, Apakshiyate, Vinashyati. The mind, body, feelings, memories, thoughts, ideas, knowledge, everything is changing continuously. I am the unaffected observer of all of them. I illumine all of them. I am Sakshi. Next slide, sir. I am Nirakaraha. I am not bound by names and forms. Body has a form. Even thoughts and feelings have certain forms. I am the witness of them. I am the pure subject. I am the formless, shapeless, faceless consciousness. I am Nitya Muktaha. I am ever liberated. Not that I am set free from samsara. I always was free. I continue to be free. I always will be free. I need not wait for a future event like death to attain liberation or mukti. Aham Nitya Muktosmi. I am Nirmalaha. I am the pure. I am free from all impurities caused by avidya. Avidya karya rahitaha. Asmi. I am in inverted commas. Asmi is the crux of this meditation effort. I meditate on all the above features as my own self until my nature sinks into me fully, totally, and absolutely as described in this verse. Nityoham, Shuddhoham, Buddhoham, Muktoham, Chidananda Rupam, Shivoham, Shivoham. Shri Hari Om Gurubhyo Namaha. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Purnima. We will listen to the last speaker, Dr. Manjula Devi.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Hari Om. As we have been studying on this, the seeker as a sadhak, we have now got doubtless knowledge with Shravanam and Mananam. And this verses that we are dealing is Nidhidhyasanam. As said before with Purnima madam, this Nidhidhyasanam is needed so that we are able to remove the identification, worries, fears, or insecurity, which is always there deep inside us as a habitual pattern. The verse 35 is also a Nidhidhyasanam verse, and the verse goes like this. Aham akashavat sarvam bahir antargato Achyutaha sada sarva samasiddho nisango nirmalo chalaha. Aham akashvat sarvam. I am like space. Bahir antargato Achyutaha. Inside and outside of everything, immutable. Sada sarva sama siddho. Always content and perfect. Nissangaha, nirmalaha, and nischalaha. Detached, pure, and immovable. Next slide, sir. So aham is this bigger I, the Atma or the self. I'm all-pervading like space. Atma has no spatial limitation. It is not subject to kala either. Anything that is spatially limited should have a form of some kind, and we know Atma is formless. Does space have spatial limitation? No, it does not. If consciousness was spatially limited, then space will become the basis of consciousness. Then consciousness would necessarily become an object or a variable, which is not so. As you're aware of time, you're also aware of space. That's why it's called time consciousness and space consciousness. This gataha means the Atma is like space and is all-pervading. When they say all-pervading, it is both in the internal world and the external world. Next slide, sir. So, bahir antargatoho. That means in the internal world and the external world. What is the internal world? This internal world is the antakarana, the inner instrument. In the internal world, I, the consciousness principle, is residing as chit. The internal world has world of thoughts, emotions in mind. It is associated with various other parts like intellect, the buddhi, and also the memory box, the chitta, and also the ego, the ahankara. This antakarana as an inner instrument will interact with the external world, which is there. So next slide, please. In the external world, I, the conscious principle, is the existence principle as Sat. All the three bodies, which Madam said before, Shariratrayam, Stula, Sukshma, and Karana, I am the lender of consciousness. The gross, subtle are all derived from the matter, Maya, and are in Jadam, the inner form, by themselves. Gross and subtle existed in potential form, and therefore Karana Shariram is also a matter. All the Sharirams, the three Shariratrayam, are insentient. Though the bodies are insentient, logically I experience the body as a sentient one. Atma makes the Shariratrayam alive with consciousness or becomes the lender of the consciousness. Just like electricity, making filament glow first and then the bulb. This invisible electricity or the invisible principle is the Atma itself. As said before, not only in the Trayam, the Shariratrayam, but it is also in the Avastatraya, that is in the awake state, the dream state, as well as in the deep sleep state. Also in the Panchakoshas. So this is what is the internal and the external world. Next slide, sir. Next slide, sir. So all the interactions that happen with inner world and outer world is called as body-mind complex. You see the inner world, the mind, intellect, memory, and ego kind of connect to the external world with 5 organs of knowledge and 5 organs of action. The derivation is 3 gunas, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. And this in different combinations, the gunas form bind us to the world. So it's very important for us to eliminate this tamas guna, refine rajas guna, and establish sattvic guna so that we understand what is the actual, the permanent, which is the Atma within us. Next slide, sir. Next slide, sir. Sada sarva samaha, and uniform in all beings. There is no subunits in Atma. All gradations belong to the Shariram acquired and the reflected consciousness. It is SATCHIT SWAROOPA. The difference being just in Nama and Rupa. In Sat, there's no difference. In Chit, there's no difference at all. This Satchidatma is same in all. This is same as gold. Where there's a ring, bangle, or a necklace, the ultimate is just the gold component in each of it. Next slide, sir. Achyutaha, that is changeless. I never ever fall means I never lose my nature. And my nature is what? Moksha Swarupa. Just as water never loses its coolness, fire never loses its heat, and the sun never loses its light, I can never lose my Moksha Swarupam. In fact, Achyuta is a name of Param Brahma, Bhagavan. In Bhagavad Gita version 4.6, we have come across this shloka where the Bhagwan says that I have been birthless and immortal and Lord of all beings. I manifest through my own yoga maya, keeping my nature, that's the Prakriti, under my own control. Next slide, sir. Nissangaha. So if Sangha, that is attachment, is causing the problem, meditation should be I am a Sangaha. Free from all relationships means that I'm unaffected. As Brahman, we should accommodate all people, all characters, all problems, all situations. I just do the role play, Vyavharika, which is Mithya, and ultimately cling to the Satya, the Atma, Asanga, accepting all of this consciously. Achalaha literally means motionless. Figuratively, it means unshaken. Psychologically means I have discovered the freedom. Freedom of what? The inner freedom. I remember the mnemonic quote, possession, object, relationship, transactions, all of this cause bondage. And my inner peace, happiness, security is not dependent on any person, object, or situation. Next slide, sir. Nirmalaha means free from ignorance. What is malaha? This is anxiety, worries, attachment, fear, anger, which are all impurities. The products of these impurities are raga, dvesha, karta, bhoktatvam, pramartatvam. So I have to say to myself, I am asangaha, I am aham truptaha, aham shantaha, aham purnatva. I am free from ignorance or ajnana. I become the Jnana Nishta and will be able to do my transaction in an unaffected way. To conclude, it is for us to train to renounce our identification with material, perishable, incidental anatma, disidentify from anatma, and learn to identify ourselves to Atma. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Manjula, and all the speakers who have nicely explained what is Nidhidhyasanam. From verse 31 to 41, we will be studying that. We know what is Brahman in our previous classes. So we know Brahman exists. The whole process of Nidhidhyasanam is to convert Brahma Asti, that which I have heard about, that great divine infinite principle, is none other than myself. This is also called Jnana Nishta, or assimilation of the teaching. Why do we need to assimilate? Although I have got this knowledge through Shravanam and Mananam, I have lived as a ahankara, as a limited being for decades and lives. And so I have a very strong habitual notion about myself, which is called a viparya bhava. And it requires a long time. Therefore, Jivan Mukti is all about alert living this teaching. Swamiji always tells us it is not how much you eat, how much you assimilate is what gives you strength. Swami Chinmayananda said, you might have gone through so many Upanishads, wonderful, but how many Upanishads have gone through you? This is one understanding we have to have about ourselves. When we say Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, it becomes difficult to understand. But this is the teaching. We are not human beings with an occasional spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings. We are Atma. But we have forgotten because of Maya. We do not know. And we think we are ordinary human beings. And that is why after Shravanam and Mananam, we have to get that Jnanam for Jnana Nishta. For those of us students who have been in this class for some time, are the right candidate. What do we meditate now? We meditate on Brahman as myself. And how do we do it? Take the same verses and repeatedly tell yourself, Aham Mithya I am there for all time. Aham Shuddhaha. My body may have impurity, but the real me has no impurity. Aham Buddhaha. I am a realized person. I am Muktaha. I am a free person. So, once I have this message, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, I need to internalize these teachings. And this is done in a in your prayer room, in a comfortable environment, there is not a problem. The real problem is in provoking situations when people accuse you. At that time, am I able to remember Aham Nityaha, Shuddhaha, Buddhaha, Muktaha, and the world is not so real? Is it possible? So Vedantic meditation is not only about myself, it also needs to say that this body is anatma, my family is anatma, my possessions are anatma, my profession is, all these are there for the time being. And as Atma, I am asangaha, I'm incapable of having relationships. For Vyavahara purposes, there is a transaction, but in reality, true freedom comes when you understand I am asangoham, 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 punah punah. Shri Guru Bhyo Namah.
Hearty thanks to Dr. Timoppa Hegde sir, to all the speakers of the day for a wonderful session, and a hearty thanks to all the Vedantins who have joined us today. Friends, remember to join us at 6:45 p.m. on Monday, 3rd February for the 64th session of GIFT, Gita for Inner Freedom and Transformation, and benefit from the enlightening knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, a life manual. Let us conclude today's session by chanting the Shanti Mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Shri Krishna.